Hey, everybody, it's Jason. Hey, so this week the podcast might sound a little different, maybe sound a little old timey, like 1977 itself. We actually recorded this one before the pandemic, so we were all together. Obviously, now we're recording remotely, but that's why it might sound a little different to you. Also, we might have said some things that are a little dated because we recorded it a couple of months ago, but it's still a worthwhile listen, we think. We hope you enjoy it. Onward and upward, here's Eraserhead.
Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm here with my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, cherry bomb.
Cherry bomb. You're not a cherry bomber. You're just a cherry bomb.
I mean, you could be, I guess, a cherry bomber, but I think a cherry bomb also describes someone. Like
yeah, that's a
firecracker.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a song from the 70s, isn't it? Cherry bomb.
That's the Runaways one.
Oh, the Runaways. Okay.
Now this is going to be controversial.
Yeah.
And please write in and call. I would dare say that the 80s song by John Mellencamp, Cherry Bomb, was a better song.
Okay.
Got any thoughts on that?
No, let's move on.
Outside the club,
no.
Bomb.
We shouldn't have given you an opening to sing. This was very bad. And in this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the 70s.
Yes.
So we should stick with the 70s, Cherry Bomb. We are in fact talking about 1977. And in this episode, we are talking about the notable feature debut of a major filmmaker that we picked, and it is David Lynch's Eraserhead.
Yes. It is notable and a debut.
Yes.
And from the year 1977.
Qualifies all the criteria.
Checks off all the boxes. Much more specific than last season when we changed the format to pick a movie.
Yeah. That was a weird one.
Yeah.
But this is a weird one. This is a very, very, very strange film from David Lynch that was actually it was a student film that he made at the American Film Institute. And it premiered in 1977 at the FilmX Film Festival in Los Angeles in March 1977. But its release kind of trickled out over the next several years, really. Playing at festivals and midnight runs and art houses and things like that. So it was a very slow build to reach an audience.
Yeah. And, in college, we used to go to the midnight movies. I think you probably did in Amherst. So I definitely did in Boston.
I think they might have had them earlier than midnight because it was a small town.
Okay. So, but that was like the next wave of it where it was like, hey, this is what was cool to do in like the late 70s and early 80s. And, there's plenty of college kids who aren't 21. Let's give them a midnight movie. But in the 70s, it was a huge thing. All these college kids would go and find movies that they couldn't otherwise see playing at midnight. And, Eraserhead did a year here or 2 years here. It was probably the quintessential, that and Pink Flamingos, I would say, probably the two quintessential midnight movies.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is also the time Rocky Horror came out 2 years earlier,
Sure,
and that's the quintessential midnight movie. But
touche, sir.
Yeah, no, but I think you're right about those other ones, and especially, I mean, Rocky Horror is kind of its own thing, but those movies, for John Waters and for David Lynch, that was the way that they built up a reputation and built up an audience. And these movies that were out there, and they would spread the word of mouth. Oh my, you got to go see this crazy ass movie that I watched at midnight at this little theater.
And we've talked about that before, how it's always fun to like find a movie that is hard to find and you can only go see it at X time at X place. And, the journey is as rewarding as the destination, Josh.
So true. Much like this podcast.
The journey to download and subscribe.
The journey of our discussion.
Yeah. Real fast. I know you're going to get into it, but
no, please.
There was this book, Midnight Movies from the Margin to the Mainstream. And it was about, it was a documentary, I think. And the 6 that they went over were Night of the Living Dead, El Topo, Pink Flamingos, The Harder They Come, Rocky Horror, and Eraserhead.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Those all I think probably from around the same time and built up their audiences that way. So yeah, I mean, it's played at various festivals. I noted down that it played at the BFI London Film Festival in 1978. Was kind of the biggest name festival that it ended up at.
Well, it played Telluride in like 86 or something.
Oh yeah, that was much later.
Yeah.
And once David Lynch directed The Elephant Man, it kind of got a resurgence in release and in business,
Right.
because that was obviously a much more high profile film. And Wikipedia claims, quoting the numbers, that it grossed $7 million, which seems like a lot to me. And I assume that includes like re-releases over the next several decades, but I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, considering it was a student film and he had to patchwork it together and starts and stops, and a lot of friends would be donating funds. I think we can all say that's a highly successful film.
Right. Well, I just meant it seems like a lot in terms of like, I don't know if I believe it, but I
Well-
suppose if you add in all the releases over time, that it could get to that
Well,
point.
like I was saying, Cinema Village in LA 1 year, the Waverly Cinema in New York 99 weeks, the Roxy Theater in San Francisco 1 year, New Art Theater in LA 3 years. So I mean, all that adds up.
Yeah,
over
I
time
suppose that's true.
for midnight showings.
The midnight showings. Yeah. I mean, even with ticket prices being much lower then, I guess, it could get you to 7 million. So yeah, I don't know what exactly the budget was of this. I mean, they probably don't actually know because of the way that it was cobbled together, like you said, over a period of years, but I'm sure it was not very much.
Yeah, I mean, and we know he got the locations for free because they were owned by AFI. So there was a lot of, and the crew is minimal, like a 5-person crew.
Right. It's most, you watch the credits of this movie, and like a lot of student films, even now, it's like director David Lynch, writer David Lynch, producer David Lynch, set design David Lynch. He really did everything on this movie pretty much.
I'll take out set design, but I'll give you editor, score, and sound design.
Yeah, that's did he not design the sets or co-design the sets?
I think he might have. Was it Jack?
Jack Fisk. Yeah,
it
is credited.
And his wife, who was a waitress, kept giving her salary to make this movie.
Right.
So,
Sissy Spacek was his wife, and still is actually.
how about that?
Yeah, amazing in Hollywood. But David Lynch delivered newspapers, and I mean, it's the story of a lot of these scrappy, low budget films. Even now, the way that people scrape everything together, or the stories like Kevin Smith putting Clerks on all his credit cards and things like that. I mean, you do what you have to do.
Robert Townsend with the Hollywood Shuffle was always a famous one in the 80s.
Yeah, and it pays off. Well, you don't ever hear the stories about the filmmakers who did that, and then they made a terrible movie that no one saw, and they went bankrupt.
No, you hear about the guys like Ed Burns.
Oh no!
Who say if I only get 12 days every 25 years for 25 grand, I'm going to do it, and then he becomes Ed Burns.
Ed Burns, the David Lynch of the 90s. Definitely. So despite building up that cult following and reviews of this movie, it was a bit difficult to find, in part because they really just trickled out over the period of years when the movie would have an established run somewhere. Like the New York Times didn't review it until 1980. But critics seemed like they didn't quite know what to make of this movie.
And that's fair.
Yes, that is fair.
I'm not always nice to the critics, but I'll agree with that one.
Yeah. So the New York Times was negative. I wasn't able to get that full review, but I'll start with this one from Variety, which is uncredited. I think at the time Variety didn't byline any reviews. So this is just the Variety staff review. And this is actually from 1977. Eraserhead is a sickening bad taste exercise made by David Lynch under the auspices of the American Film Institute. Set apparently in some undefined apocalyptic future era, Eraserhead consists mostly of a man sitting in a room trying to figure out what to do with his horribly mutated child. Lynch keeps throwing in graphic close-ups of the piteous creature and pulls out all gory stops in the unwatchable climax. Like a lot of AFI efforts, the pick has good tech values, particularly the inventive sound mixing, but little substance or subtlety. The mind boggles to learn that Lynch labored on this pick for 5 years. So
that's pretty harsh.
They are very harsh.
Also, I didn't place it as futuristic.
Yeah, I didn't really either. And I think Lynch has talked about it was inspired by the time that he spent living in Philadelphia and presumably, not very well off neighborhood. So
right. Where he was, he just saw the, I don't even want to call them the dregs, but just people who were really down on their luck, shall we say.
Right. And obviously they didn't all have mutant babies, but you can see that as a reflection in here. And I mean, it's not a realistic movie in any way. So But it doesn't have to be a future.
But when you see people who fall through the cracks of society, it can be very rough.
Right, absolutely. What I'm saying is that just because it's surreal and doesn't reflect reality doesn't mean that it has to be an apocalyptic future.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Newsweek, and this is, I think, in part from like a more of a feature story. This is from 1978. Jack Knoll in Newsweek said, Lynch comes amazingly close to the logic of dreams and nightmares, in which successive layers of reality seem to dissolve, sucking you into a terrifying vortex. The movie clearly deals with an apocalypse, but the apocalypse is not external, not political or technological. It is internal, the ultimate corruption of matter itself throughout the universe. So I can sort of buy that, I guess. Yeah. I mean, that's actually positive. The Variety is the most toxic review that I threw in here.
The internal apocalypse. I mean, it seemed like every character was going through enormous amounts of conflict.
Yes. A lot of turmoil in their inner souls in this movie.
Storm and Drang.
Sure. And then I'm not sure the exact date of this. This is Pauline Kael in The New Yorker as collected in her book. I think it's called 5001 Nights, the Movies. David Lynch seems to have reinvented the experimental film movement. Watching this daringly irrational movie with its interest in dream logic, you almost feel that you're seeing a European avant-garde Gothic of the 20s or early 30s. There are images that recall Fritz Lang's M and Cocteau's Blood of a Poet and Buñuel's Un Chien Andalou, and yet there is a completely new sensibility at work. Lynch pulls you inside wormy states of anxiety. Henry, that's the main character, appears to come out of the viewer's subconscious. He experiences a man's worst fears of courtship and marriage and fatherhood to a whimpering monster. The slow, strange rhythm is very unsettling and takes some getting used to, but it's an altogether amazing, sensuous film. It even has an element of science fiction and some creepy musical numbers, and the soundtrack is as original and peculiar as the imagery. So she also got a sci-fi vibe out of it.
Yeah, the courtship element was minimal, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, the scene where he meets what's her name, Mary's parents. Yeah.
She's like, the mom's like, did you have sexual relations with my daughter? And then tries to make out with him.
Yeah, or make out with him, or just kind of like lick his neck or something. Yeah. It seems like.
But I will say, I mean, Un Chien Andalou was definitely the movie that I placed it closest with, even though a lot of people or the reviews that I was kind of looking at were like, yes, it's surrealist, like Buñuel, but this is a much more internal conflict than like some of the Buñuel stuff.
So. Right. And the Buñuel, I haven't actually seen Un Chien Andalou, but I've seen other Buñuel, and I feel like his stuff is also a lot more like political, using that surrealism to comment on social issues. And I don't think Lynch has any interest in that.
But I do think that's great is like, we're taking an inspiration and personalizing it in a different way. And you should see Un Chien Andalou.
I should, and isn't it only like 10 minutes long or something?
I don't remember, but it's I don't remember the length, but I remember the movie pretty well, and I haven't probably seen it in 20 years. So yeah, it sticks with you.
Right. So. I'm sure. I mean, I've seen various images. I mean, there's obviously one very, very, very famous image that I've seen.
The eyeball?
The eyeball. Yes, the eyeball. So, had you ever seen this movie before?
I had never seen this movie. Had you?
No, I never have. I'd seen other Lynch movies, but this was one that I'd been meaning to see. This was probably in my, Netflix DVD queue from 10 years ago, and I just never have gotten to it.
And what a side benefit of the podcast, Josh.
Right.
Finally get to fill in some of the cracks that we've left in our own film education.
That is true. And maybe we can provide a little of that for our listeners as well. So hopefully we inspired some people to watch Eraserhead before listening to this
Or
podcast.
At least UHF last year.
Well, I mean, they're of equal stature. So I hope that people would get to them. Dave, had you ever seen this?
I don't think I had, and it was great to finally catch it. Because,
Dave watched it. All right,
I did watch this one, and it's something I've always wanted to watch, whether I had seen it or not.
Right? Yeah. I mean, I felt the same way. It was definitely something I always wanted to watch. I had liked a lot of other David Lynch movies.
Yeah.
Although I haven't actually watched a Lynch movie in probably since 2001 when I saw Mulholland Drive in theaters. So it's been a while since I saw anything that he's done.
Well, I think even if you didn't know anything about this movie other than by David Lynch, that the design, the posters that we all saw, in college dorms and everywhere.
Yeah. There's one image in the movie of of Henry kind of backlit with the dust surrounding him and the hair that like it just shows up everywhere.
It's funny. I was waiting the whole time for that shot.
Yeah, I was.
When's it gonna happen?
I'm waiting the whole time for you to get your hair that high because you have the potential.
Commenting on Dave's hair. And I did love that over the, I don't know if you saw this detail, but because the movie took almost 5 years to shoot,
he kept his hair that way for 5 years.
Jack Nance, the star of the movie, really was committed to being Eraserhead. And yeah, that's dedication right there.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff, including what did Jack do?
Oh, right, the short film on Netflix that just came out.
Yeah, did you guys watch that?
I haven't seen that. I should.
I heard it's great.
It's to me, it was like it's funny and it's so specific, his dialogue, and it's it's him interrogating a monkey detective pretty much as another detective on a train. But I felt like it could have been 4.5 minutes instead of 17 minutes. Which, interestingly enough, as you might have read, when Lynch was pitching this to the AFI brass, he gave him a 21-page script, a 22-page script. So they're like, "Oh, cool, we'll do a 21-minute movie." And then they're like very shocked that it clocked in at the original cut almost 1 hour and 50, and then he chopped it to 89 minutes.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like I would have liked this more if it was 21 minutes long, honestly.
Well, that's fair. And maybe we should talk about your thoughts on it.
We will when we come back and talk our general thoughts on Eraserhead. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1977, we are talking about the feature film debut of David Lynch, Eraserhead. And this movie is a classic, but I did not get into it. I wanted to. I feel like I'm some sort of Philistine because I didn't. And I've liked other David Lynch movies. I like movies that are surreal and nonsensical, which this is. I mean, we could recount the plot, but I mean, what even is the plot?
Name a surrealist film that you really like.
Oh man, now you're just gonna like put me on the spot. I mean, I would say I really like other David Lynch movies like Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway, although it has been a very long time since I saw them.
I guess you could say 12 Monkeys kind of.
Yeah, Gilliam's stuff is a bit surreal, although I think it has more stride. 12 Monkeys is probably one of the most structured Gilliam movies, actually. Well, I mean, like I really enjoyed the Adventures of Baron Munchausen that we talked about last season, which I know you didn't like.
That was also much more structured than this was.
Yes, it was, although less structured than 12 Monkeys.
I think, Dave's buddy up in Canada, Gaspar Noé, right?
Oh, yeah. He's not in Canada. He's French.
Yeah,
from France.
He's not French Canadian?
No, he's French.
Oh.
But yeah, I would say the one Gaspar Noé, the climax, the movie that Dave loves so much, I absolutely hated. Yeah. So maybe that's a bad example.
That's kind of what I think about lately.
Yeah, I mean, that is a very surreal movie. I don't know. I think like Ty West a little bit, the horror director, his movies are kind of surreal and slow. And well, I mean, honestly, my favorite movie of 2019, Sunset, the Laszlo Nemes film, is very surreal, and you'd be hard pressed to say what the plot really is. And I found that movie fascinating for close to 2.5 hours. So I feel like I can get into movies like this. It's just this one I didn't.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, it's relentless was one of the words that was used in one of the reviews, maybe, I think. But it is unrelenting. But beautiful. I mean, it looks amazing, the black and white and how stark it is. And even like I just like watching the shots of him walking in these empty urban sprawls and whatnot. And I mean, I know it's well regarded for its sound design, and that was pretty incredible, I thought.
Yeah, the sound design is great, and often I think creates that feeling of unease even without you like noticing specific sounds, just because they layer so much in there. But certainly there's the scene that we were talking about earlier where Henry, the main character played by Jack Nance, goes to his girlfriend, I guess, Mary's house to meet her parents, and he's sitting on the couch there awkwardly with her and her mother, and you hear these I don't even know what you would call the sounds. Yeah, constantly, and this like sort of whiny sounds in the background.
Yeah, much like Dave's cat, right?
Yes, yeah, it is kind of that.
I wish the audience could hear this cat. It sounds like the mutated baby of Henry at this point.
Yeah, it does a little bit.
I don't
But
know what her problem is.
But yeah, no, that scene and it's dogs like nursing.
right, and I
I
think
thought it was like rats or mice when I
right.
first
And I think
started.
what's great about that is you hear the sound first and you're like, what is this horrific thing that's making this
Yeah.
sound? And it's puppies.
Right.
And that's kind of great because Lynch is getting you to be horrified by puppies.
Well, yeah, well, we talked about sound design in our Sex Lies and Videotape episode and how effective it can be. And I think this is the idea of layering 15 sounds over each other. And it was him and Alan Splett as the sound design team. They worked a year on the audio after production was done just to get it to where they thought it needed to be. So it was mood inducing. And that whole sequence that you're talking about where he goes to Mary X's who lives with her parents is one insane thing after the next, right?
Yeah.
You got a dad who's a plumber and is cooking man-made tiny chickens, and he has Henry butcher these chickens and
Well, not butcher them. I mean, they're already
Carve
you just
the chickens.
carve the chicken after it's cooked.
yeah, and then it just splurts out what we assume to be blood.
Oh yeah, who knows?
There's
There's so many fluids splurting
Yeah.
throughout this movie, and Lord knows what any of them are.
Yeah,
really.
there's the old lady who we're guessing is a grandma who just sits and the mom goes and makes the salad bowl like on her lap behind her and lights a cigarette for her, And then as we've said, there's the reveal that Henry and Mary X have a baby and the mom feels the proper response is to come on to Henry.
Well, but and also insist that he gets married to Mary. But
Yeah.
and probably the best line or the funniest line in the movie is when the mom, tells Mary, she's got the baby, it's at the hospital or something, and Mary says, "But they don't even know if it is a baby."
Right.
It's-
Yeah.
What a thing to say. And then of course you see it and you think, that was an accurate way to describe it.
I thought also it was funny when when the dad asks Henry to carve the chickens and he hands him like this huge carving knife for these little tiny chickens. That was pretty funny to me.
Yeah. I mean, there's funny moments or just humor in the weirdness of this movie. But honestly, as much as you're right that it's impressively designed. I mean, the sound and also the sets and the way that it looks, especially on such limited resources. But I just found so much of it just tedious to watch.
And I wonder if you're right. Like if it was a 12-minute movie, would I have gotten the same thing out of it?
Right.
And as I do in my middle age, Josh,
Mm.
I sometimes start and stop on these films.
Yeah, you fall asleep a lot during the movie.
I didn't fall asleep, but
okay.
I sometimes need breaks to replenish the energy
Yeah.
and get back into it. And I think in this regard, it was helpful because it was like 3 clean half hours that I could watch this film, which I'm sure pisses a lot of film traditionalists off.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I did take a bit of a break in the middle of this movie for a little while because and I was watching it like extremely late at night before going to bed, and I was really tired, and so it's like really just already I feel like I'm in a half dream world, and then ended up watching this movie.
And Dave, what do you think? Do you think it would have mattered if it was a short film versus this?
I think you two are amateurs.
See, this is what I was worried. But I feel like I would have liked this more as a short film. And I've seen, going to you and I both have gone to the Damn Short Film Festival in Boulder City near here in Vegas. And I feel like I've seen a lot of surrealist short films that I will enjoy because it's okay for 12 minutes or whatever to just be like, I don't know what this is, but it's got a bunch of cool images and I'm kind of digging it. And then it's over. But to sit through that for nearly 90 minutes, for me at least, was just too much.
You are right, Josh. I was in one of those films, as you well know.
You were in a few of those films
Yeah.
over time and have directed them, but
no, I'm talking about the surrealist.
Oh yeah,
films,
I actually, yes, I was going to even bring up our friend Tom Barnes,
who's a very talented filmmaker out here in Las Vegas and makes these absolutely insane kind of surrealist. You can see the influence of David Lynch on Tom, and he's so talented. Like, I wonder what would happen if he made a feature.
Right. And I think he was at one point going to, and that never happened. And as much as I love those movies, those shorts that he made, and I was excited at the prospect of him making a feature, but I do wonder if that would have worked as well if he had done the same kind of thing for 90 minutes, or I might have been like, oh, this doesn't really sustain itself for this long.
Yeah. Well, and then part of that is that the nature, I guess, of surrealism is we're used to watching things with linear plots, or even if it's non-linear plots that are followable.
Right. I mean, and there is a plot of sorts to this movie. It's not just
Right.
random imagery.
We've already kind of well, we haven't talked about the first 4 minutes of the film,
which is the conception of the mutant baby, maybe.
Yeah, that's, I guess, after like reading afterwards about it, that's what it seemed to be. But like, and then there's a point in the film where we see the baby getting sick and having like those sores, and I was like, okay, well, the guy we saw at the beginning had the sores, so maybe that's what the mutant baby turns into.
Right. And we see him again at the end of the movie.
Right. But probably not, since, spoiler alert, Henry murders the baby. So
right. Although even after Henry murders the baby maybe isn't dead.
Right, because it grows into this enormous, maybe he freed the baby.
And also maybe he is the baby. That's the other thing that we see at the end, that there's moments where his head is replaced by the baby's.
And that's why I induced why he murdered the baby, because he had this, whatever dream or hellish nightmare that the baby is going to replace him, or
right, has decapitated him.
Yeah,
sure.
And then his decapitated head, a boy finds it on the street and brings it to an eraser factory, and
well, it's the
pencil factory, and his
yeah.
head becomes
erasers. Yeah,
it's Eraserhead.
Yeah.
But that scene was pretty funny, where the guy, where he's at the counter and like he's ringing for the bell, and the boss comes in, and he's like, all right, I got it. That was a weird, funny bit.
Yeah. There's some funny bits, I guess, but I don't know.
Look, it's not for you, this one.
I guess not. And I thought it was for me. That's the thing, is that I thought this is a movie I'm going to really be into. And I just was not. So I wanted to ask you, though, because this movie is often said to be about the anxieties of fatherhood. Did you resonate with that at all?
Not at all.
Okay.
I like being a dad, though. So
yeah.
But I did read all that stuff about, he had the daughter who had clubbed feet, and it's, that's got to be so much tougher.
Sure.
Being a parent's tough on its own, but having to raise a child with any type of disability is going to be tougher. And but yeah, no, I got that from him. Like, but I don't ever feel that way. No.
Okay.
So
fair enough. The baby does look amazing.
Crazy. And he will never reveal, or never has revealed, how he created the creature.
Right. Which is, again, is another one of these things that on the budget that must have been minuscule,
right,
to create something like that looks, that looks as scary as anything in any horror movie.
Right. It's I was reading, like, maybe it's a embalmed lamb embryo. That was one of the,
and it also, but like, it moves,
sneaky,
like its mouth moves, and it's,
right, and none of those things could move independent of each other. The neck, the mouth, the eyes, they all had to move at the same time.
Yeah.
Pretty awesome for a student filmmaker.
Right. It looks amazing. It reminded me a little of like the chest burster in Alien,
Right.
sort of the embryonic form of the alien, which is a couple years later. So I don't know if there's any potential influence from this on H.R. Geiger and Ridley Scott.
Well, we know H.R. Geiger has been influenced by it, so much so that, didn't David Lynch say he was stealing his ideas?
Oh, I don't know. I hadn't heard that, but
so.
It's maybe so. I would believe it after seeing that creature and having seen Alien. They have a lot of similarities to them, certainly visually.
I thought that was a big thing.
Yeah, you could be right. I don't know. I hadn't read that anywhere. But either way, that baby is unsettling to watch, and especially when it gets, as you were talking about, those like sores on it.
Yeah.
And just the shots of the close-up shots of the baby covered in those sores are just viscerally unpleasant.
Hard to watch.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a quote from Geiger. I don't have it exactly, but he had said when he watched Eraserhead that he thought David Lynch did a better job of getting inside his head than he could do on getting inside his own head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah. So then I guess he was influenced, and you can see how that could be almost like a starting point, and then Geiger takes it in this more monstrous, dangerous direction. And of course, in the context of a Hollywood science fiction movie that has a linear plot and where you have to understand what the monster is and
Well,
stuff like that.
let's go back and
Yes.
did you like the Metamorphosis when you read it, Kafka?
I don't know that I read The Metamorphosis.
And you graduated high school.
And I graduated college, both.
The
I might have read it. I'm not sure.
the three literary influences that that I had read about were the Metamorphosis, which I have read.
Oh, congratulations.
Nikolai Gogol's The Nose, about a nose that comes off a man's face and develops a life of his own.
Yeah, I think I read some other Gogol maybe in a Russian
Yeah.
lit class, but not that.
And then one Bible verse. He's like, I read one Bible verse. It all came together and I shut the Bible.
That's a very David Lynch
Yeah.
kind of thing to say. And
Right.
I mean, David Lynch too is, I mean, obviously he's a very weird guy, but I think Lynch is also like a guy who enjoys the idea of messing with like journalists and fans and stuff. So you have to wonder, like, half the time the things that he says, whether he's like sincere about them
He's
or
very
not.
subversive.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought those were interesting things. Few other things that would be worth noting was it's in the National Film Registry. We know that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie, regardless of our opinion, that like is a landmark in film history.
Yeah. And I mean, not to go too much into the legacy because that's our next section, but the Online Film Critics Society ranked it as the second best debut film ever. Are you a member of the Online Film Critics Society?
I am not, but their list of the best debut films ever
Right.
is
It's
really
a big deal. So.
I assume it's number 2 behind Citizen Kane.
Yeah, you were right. You could be a member of the Online Film Critics
Wow,
Society.
if that's my qualification. Yeah, so what did we, I'm
You're
trying to
out of it.
formulate a thought here and it's not
Dave,
happening.
what were your thoughts on the film, Dave?
I liked it. I was it's one of those classics that when you go back to and immediately see, especially with my piecing it together, looking at inspirations, it's like I immediately saw so many things that, if I was doing
Have inspired it.
yeah,
Or
backwards
have
It
been
was inspired,
by it,
yeah.
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 So,
That's
totally.
way to tie it into your podcast.
Right. No, but I
I'm
mean,
just
he's
kidding.
right.
I'm
And
just
I think
kidding.
that's what I'm saying is that even if I kind of wasn't into the experience of watching it, I can see how important it is, how influential it is, and how much of an achievement it is, especially as a student film. I mean, if you're a film student and you watch this movie, you just give up.
Yeah. Yeah. And as we've noted, it has influenced Dave's cats to act
to,
like
yes,
mutants
to
today.
howl and whine like the puppies in Eraserhead. Did you like the song, the David Lynch written song that the lady in the radiator sings?
David Lynch did he write it? I thought
He wrote
that
the
was-
lyrics to it, I think,
Yeah,
and maybe the
okay.
melody. And he is a musician. I mean,
Right.
he's released albums later on, and
Yeah.
he was a
Yeah,
co-creator
in
of.
Heaven. It was like,
It's like a 40s style
Yeah.
jazzy kind of thing.
That was the
Yeah.
most disturbing part, I thought, for some reason. It was just
yeah,
so
it
weird.
was it him and Peter Ivers who wrote that together, or did Peter Ivers write that song?
I think if that's the composer wrote the
Yeah.
music and Lynch wrote the lyrics.
I liked it, and what I really like about it is it's often covered by the Pixies in concert.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
by
awesome.
Pixies. I'm
Yeah.
a big Pixies fan.
Right,
as you know,
right.
so.
Yeah, I mean, it's disturbing, and it's cool that you can take something like that, like 40s, kind of jazzy poppy song, and make it into something unsettling, just like Puppies. Think something that you think is nice, and it just turns
Dave's
out
cats.
and Dave's cats, and it just turns out to be disturbing. So I wasn't sure why the lady in the radiator had the big chipmunk cheeks.
Yeah.
And also, I was confused that I think I didn't realize that she and Mary were not the same person.
I could see the confusion at first, but then I think it became more clear as you went on.
Yeah, it took me until the credits. And when I realized that there were 2 different actors credited for those roles, that I was like, okay, they're definitely not the same person.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, to a few facts about because of how long it took to film. Lynch had to sleep in Henry's bedroom for like a year while he was trying to make the movie, which has got to be disturbing.
I
you
mean,
know?
I feel like, though, again, David Lynch, he probably was like really into that.
Yeah, you might be right. Then I also like the fact that like there's a scene where Henry opens the door and goes into a room, and it's supposed to take place like over a year, and it literally took him that long to film to like the shot they made of him opening the door, and then they couldn't film the actual entry into the room until a year later because of their
Right.
budgetary problems.
Right.
So
But I will say that like sometimes you can watch movies that were shot over a long period of time or that had like later
you can
reshoots.
see the difference.
Yeah, and
really
this
kind
movie
of-
is seamless. It really is.
right. And then one other fun thing about the production of this was, you know, they're running out of money. They're running out of money, and Terrence Malick presented it. You know, Terrence Malick. Come
I mean,
on,
who was another AFI graduate?
right? He's an AFI. You know, he's as big as they get. You know,
Right. Although,
and
I mean, at this time, he was just starting out too.
he had still. I mean, 77. So he had done Badlands before this, I think,
I
and
think-
maybe one other.
Yeah, but I mean, he
Yeah.
wasn't like what he is now.
Sure, but he was well regarded, and he had presented it to a potential investor, and the guy was like, "This is bullshit," and he like stormed out of the room.
I mean, I
and,
can
like,
absolutely see that because this isn't a movie, even though it became a classic, this isn't a movie that you look at and you think dollar signs, you know?
right. Did you read anything from Greg Olson, who I think was like the co-author of Lynch's autobiography?
I did not.
I thought there was a good quote about, because you know he grew up in the Pacific Northwest.
Lynch did?
Yeah, and it was great in Montana and very nice. And then, you know, we talked about his move to Philadelphia and like how horrible that was. And Olson has this kind of quote on how it's a bipolar heaven and hell vision of America, which kind of not only you see in this, but in a lot of Lynch's work.
Yeah, although what is the heaven part of it? I'm not sure I got that.
Fair.
I mean, I can see that maybe in some of other Lynch's other works, especially like Twin Peaks, where it's like, you know, or Blue Velvet too, where it's like the idyllic small town that seems heavenly. But this movie doesn't even have a part where like things seem to be going well and then they go awry. Like nothing is going well from the start of this movie.
No, it's a dark one.
I mean, I guess you could argue that Henry is on vacation, as he notes multiple times, and that's nice. But
did you take that as him being on vacation or him being laid off?
I mean, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of funny. Again, when someone asks him, when Mary's dad or mother says, "What do you do?" and he's like, "Oh, I'm on vacation."
Yeah.
Like that's his job, is being on vacation.
The last character we probably should mention is the next door neighbor, the sultry, you know, sex pot next door neighbor. Who,
Yes.
he has a one night stand with, maybe.
And then she
probably.
sinks into a pool of something.
And then he wants more with her, and she's already with another man, and it kind of sets him off to murder his spawn.
Yes, that is one way to look at it.
Yeah.
But right. I mean, it's not clear at any point what is actually happening or whether it even matters what is, quote, actually happening. I mean, the
Right.
whole thing is just a surreal, like, fever dream anyway. So,
Right.
I mean, that was and I guess I sort of felt like at a certain point, like, none of this really matters. Like, I would like this
Maybe
movie.
that's the point.
I mean, I suppose it is, but it just was hard for me to get into. I feel like if this was an art installation and I was in a museum and I walked by a monitor showing this, like, and I just watched watched 5 minutes in the middle of it, I would be like, wow, this is really cool looking, but I wouldn't feel like I had to care about it for 90 minutes or be invested in anything that happens. And I would just enjoy the imagery of it.
And I think that's a great thought, and one we should sum up this segment with.
All right. So do you want to rate this out of 5 mutant babies?
I was hoping we would go with some.
I mean, it seems like the obvious one.
I know we were going to do. Did we do aborted fetuses for 4 months?
I
3
think we've
days?
done, you know, fetus. Yeah, we have done
a
that.
lot of recurring themes on
a
this
lot of
show.
fetus stuff in Juno and this and at least one other one.
I mean, I guess I give it 2.5, which I don't know if I feel good about because, like you're saying, it didn't really do anything for me from a story standpoint. Although I could see, as Dave might be happy to hear, if you had seen this in a theater experience and got all the reactions of other people at the same time, like how that could elevate the experience, you know? But if you rated it any lower, I think you're doing a disservice to the technical merits of the film.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I actually did rate it lower on Letterboxd. I gave it 2, but I think you're right that you have to give it credit for so much. And just because our personal reactions were not strong doesn't mean that it's not an important or an accomplishment. So I will bump it up to 2.5 mutant babies.
All right.
Dave, I think you like this more than we did.
Yeah, I gave it 3.5 mutant babies. I agree with most of your criticisms. I just, it's just so weird and cool that I still really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
This is what I like when Dave watches the movie because he keeps throwing us for curveballs with like, you think he's gonna say this, then we get to the rating and it's totally out of nowhere.
Amazing. Dave is the most sophisticated of us all in regards to Eraserhead. And
In regards to mutant baby ratings.
yeah. So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of Eraserhead. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1977, we are talking about the feature debut of filmmaker David Lynch, Eraserhead. And as far as the legacy goes, I mean, we've talked about this a bit. This movie is incredibly influential just in general.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, every modern surrealist piece of film owes a debt to this one, I'd say.
Yeah, and like I was saying, going to like film festivals and seeing short films, and I think there's a lot more surrealist short films than there are features, because it's the kind of thing where if you're just going to make a short movie, you can just throw a bunch of weird stuff together and say, oh, it's surreal. But you can see the influence of Eraserhead throughout film festival programs.
And let's look at the famous fans of it. Kubrick loved it, showed it to the cast and crew of The Shining and said, this is kind of what I'm going for here. John Waters, our one of the other midnight movie pioneers, loved it. And then obviously, and I love this so much, people don't realize, because he's such a comedic icon. Mel Brooks was the producer of The Elephant Man.
Oh, right.
Brooks Films. And Mel Brooks's Oscar for Best Picture is for The Elephant Man, and he saw this and they offered Lynch a few different ideas, but one of them was The Elephant Man, which I think is amazing. Like that Mel Brooks, kind of saw Eraserhead, was like, this is our guy.
Right.
And then lastly, George Lucas liked it and supposedly offered him Return of the Jedi.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, and I can see, if you see THX 1138, George Lucas's first film, which is very surreal, like you could see elements of Eraserhead being influential on that.
I think, the one filmmaker that we didn't mention, Darren Aronofsky, would be a highly influenced.
Absolutely. Pi is very, 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 very influenced by this. And speaking of what you were saying about Mel Brooks, to me, what was sort of fascinating about this is that now we think of Lynch as a guy who makes stuff like this. I mean, the more recent Lynch work, like the short film on Netflix, the third season of Twin Peaks, or even going back to Mulholland Drive or Lost Highway, all of that stuff is very surreal and strange and very Eraserhead-like. But the immediate reaction to the success of this movie was that he got offered Hollywood stuff, that he did The Elephant Man, and then he did Dune. There were these big mainstream productions, and it's sort of almost hilarious to me that anyone could watch this movie and say, you know what, this guy, let's hire him to make a blockbuster.
Well, yeah, that is a good point about like The Elephant Man, which probably wouldn't be made today anyway.
I haven't actually seen it. Have you?
I've seen it, but like just kind of in bits and pieces. I need to do a full sitting of it.
Yeah, and I haven't seen Dune either. I've seen the later Lynch movies where he had already been established as like guy who makes weird art movies.
But who I was thinking of? Who did Primer? What's that guy's name?
Oh yeah, Shane Carruth.
Right, Shane Carruth. That would be like if you watch Primer and you're like, Shane Carruth, why don't you take on this fun yarn of a time travel tale?
Right, exactly. Like, let's hire Shane Carruth to direct a Marvel movie or something.
Right,
like,
yeah.
It just doesn't
Around the World in 80 Days by Shane Carruth. That would be funny. But the point is Mel Brooks genius.
Always, yeah. I mean, and hey, good for Mel Brooks and good for David Lynch for getting those opportunities. And obviously, I mean, at least in terms of Dune, that movie was a giant failure, and it kind of set him on the path to doing the weird stuff that he probably should have always been doing.
Yeah, Lynch has become more of an on-screen presence too now. He acted in that What Did Jack Do? And he had a great turn. I know we're not allowed to remember that this was an actual TV show, but he was great in Louis when he played when Louis C.K. was going to take over Dave Letterman's show, and he played like the old school TV executive who was like coaching him. He did a great job in that.
He did. And I feel like he's a little, not to the same extent, but like Werner Herzog, he's sort of become this pop culture figure because of his weird personality.
I mean, dude, did you just create the best buddy comedy for
David Lynch and Werner Herzog?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like the two grandpas who are down on, they could even be filmmakers. Like we were once famous filmmakers. and then the economy burst, and now we live in our own
Talk about a
apocalypse.
fever dream.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be amazing.
That would
too.
be insane. But yeah, he has this mesmerizing presence. The one thing I always remember, so as of course we said, David Lynch, he's an AFI graduate. This was an AFI film. And I think one of the legacies of this movie is establishing AFI as this like major presence, the conservatory or the school, the film school of AFI wasn't established until 1969. So it was still relatively new
Yeah.
and for something coming out of this. But I used to attend the AFI Film Festival for a number of years. And, you know, like at any film festival, they have a little pre-show thing that you end up seeing at every screening.
Right.
And one year it was David Lynch kind of introducing the festival in his very David Lynch way. And he talks about, I forget what exactly he said, but, you know, it's something about all the stuff that the American Film Institute does. And at the end, he says, I love AFI, and his very like Lynchian, like Coneheads way. And I probably went to, you know, 15 screenings at that festival that year. And every time you hear him say that, the audience was cracking up.
That's good. You know, one, as we mentioned, Pixies.
Yes.
Black Francis really loves this because, you know, his other group, Frank Black and the Catholics, the song I Gotta Move was kind of inspired by this as well.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I would be curious to hear that Pixies cover of the weird song from this movie. That's so funny.
I've seen him do
Do they just do it live, or is there a recorded version?
Yeah, I think so. I think I must have seen it, but you know, one other thing, and once in a while we come across one of these movies where like it's got like all these tragedies connected to it. Did you read about any of that stuff?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so starting with our man Henry, you know.
Yeah, Jack Nance.
Yeah, he his wife, who was Jerry Van Dyke's daughter, and I forget, she was a porn star, but I forget her name.
Okay.
She ended up hanging herself, but what had happened was like Jack Nance was on the phone with her, like trying to tell her, you know, hey, don't do this, blah blah blah. And there was like an electrical storm and it cut the phones for 45 minutes. So not only did they get cut off, but he couldn't reach like a sheriff or a deputy. So like in that time, she killed herself. And then Jack Nance himself, I guess, a very weird way to die in his early 40s. He was supposedly in a fight outside of Windchills, and like he got like punched in the face, and his friend's like, what happened? It's like, I guess I got what I deserved. And he died of like a subdural hematoma the next day.
That can happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then the last one was Peter Ivers, who we mentioned, who
the
did
composer.
The score.
Yeah.
He was murdered, and it's still an unsolved mystery. Like bludgeoned to death. And at one point, one of the suspects was Harold Ramis, because Ivers and Ramis's wife were friends or something like that. But there is I forget the guy's name. There's like a prime suspect for this, but the investigation by the cops was botched so badly they were never able to find any clues because of how contaminated it was.
Well, that's horrifying. So thank you for all
also,
that.
the kids in the hall did a sketch based on Eraserhead. So.
Oh, okay. Well, that's nicer. I know Jack Nance. I mean, before he died, he did work with Lynch on other projects.
And Lynch does a lot of that where he brings back collaborators.
Yeah, he does. I mean, more famous people in the later part of his career, but I mean, David Lynch also, he launched Naomi Watts's career. I mean, she would not be famous. She would not be where she is without Mulholland Drive. I mean, that really made her career. And I mean, and most recently we had that short film, but otherwise there was the Twin Peaks third season, which I never watched. I watched the first season of Twin Peaks, not when it first aired, but sometime later on DVD, but I never stuck with it.
I've never watched any, but I'd like to, you know, and that kind of launched Kyle MacLachlan, right? So,
yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But my favorite piece of David Lynch lore, or I would say on screen, I'll do one on screen and one off screen.
Yeah.
On screen, it has to be Robert Loggia in Lost Highway when the guy's tailgating him and like he chases him down and he's, you know, he like basically beats the shit out of this dude. He goes, "You don't tailgate, asshole," or something like that. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I will say like Lynch's humor is kind of underrated.
It's really funny. Yeah. But my favorite David Lynch story, having gone to school in Boston, I don't know if you ever heard the story, you were in Amherst, was that he and Peter Wolf from the Jay Giles Band, the lead singer, the Wooba Gooba lead singer of the Jay Giles Band, were roommates at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. And David Lynch kicked Peter Wolf out of their room for being too weird.
Wow.
He said, "I can't live with you, Peter Wolf. You're too weird for me." How weird do you have to be too weird for David Lynch?
Yeah,
Josh?
well, maybe he was less weird at that time. I feel like he's gotten weirder over the course of his life.
I feel like he could have been inspired by the nonsensical ramblings of the Wooba Gooba.
Maybe that was it. He was like, that guy's too weird. And then after he kicks him out, he started thinking, you know what?
He's
Maybe
onto
I should
something.
I should be more like that guy.
Yeah.
That is a story. And I mean, we mentioned a little Lynch as a musician too. He's put out albums and of course the music and the sound design in this movie, which he had a part in.
Autobiographies, well regarded. I haven't read it yet.
No, I haven't not as either.
You know, and I know he doesn't, you know, we see like all these filmmakers offering master classes. I don't think he does that, but I think he does like an intensive weekend or
maybe
semester
something
workshop.
like that. Yeah. He is. I mean, it's interesting because like on the one hand, he's this weird kind of aloof figure, but on the other hand, he seems very like genuinely friendly and interested in embracing, you know, young filmmakers or actors or people who are fans of his or whatever, and that he's weirdly approachable in a way.
I think that's great. You know, you try to, you know, maintain your humanity within society. That's a good thing.
Okay, so. that's a real
endorsement.
heavy way to say it. I just thought he was like friendly and nice, but okay, that too.
Speaking of music, I was gonna say I feel like music videos in general have gotten a lot of inspiration from David Lynch.
Nine Inch
Nails,
right?
Tool,
Oh
all that
yeah,
kind of stuff. And Back into the Dark, my claymation stop motion animation music video.
All right,
everything's a plug for his own
Rosen.
stuff. You
was your music influenced at all by David Lynch's music?
I haven't watched enough David Lynch to say, but probably.
It would be interesting because, you know, they released this soundtrack in, I think, 1982, the Eraserhead soundtrack.
Yeah.
It's got, like we said, these 40 styles pieces and Fats Waller. But I think it might also have these pops of like sound design, which are like...
well, they'd have to put something else on it because there isn't enough music, enough songs.
Interesting. You could play that against like the Phil Spector wall of sound where it's also like 15 things at once and see what the mood becomes.
Yeah, it's very unsettling, certainly.
Yeah.
So that's Eraserhead, and that's this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can follow us on social media.
You can. I'm Jason Harris Comedy, Facebook and Instagram. J Harris Comedy on Twitter. The website, Go for Jason. Every day. It's, you know, coming along. And then
you got a whole crew, like piece by piece, laying bricks for the website.
We're getting there, Josh.
Yeah.
We're awesomemovieyear.com, which is just basically our feed.
What else do you need? You get the episodes. That's
right.
That's what the people want.
Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram, and Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. And Josh, before you plug yourself, can I just say, besides hearing Dave's mutant baby cat, we just heard a house phone ringing nonstop. What the hell is going on with the sound design here today, Dave?
It's all. So you shouldn't have mentioned it because it should be just like unsettling. In the background, like Eraserhead.
It has been unsettling to me.
Yeah. I am at joshbellhateseverything.com. Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And listen to our producer, David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
I get to do another plug now. Piecing It Together, you could listen to anywhere you listen to this podcast and other podcasts. And check us out on social media at Piecing Pod.
And Dave has a Patreon.
And sign up for the Patreon.
Sign up for the Patreon. Yeah.
Do it all. Yeah. Listen to Dave's music, inspired by David Lynch, maybe.
If we get enough subscribers to Dave's Patreon, we're going to do some Awesome Movie Year episodes.
Yeah. Who cares about piecing it together? Subscribe to the Patreon to get some Awesome Movie Year
all
content.
the other stuff that's going to be on there.
Yeah. What do we have in our next episode, Jason?
Josh, I'm so excited for the next episode.
Okay.
Because it is a Martin Scorsese film, and it's one I haven't seen. And I love Martin Scorsese. But this is our box office bomb of 1977, the gritty musical, perhaps, we'll see. New York, New York, starring Robert De Niro and Liza Minnelli.
That is a combo. And I am also interested in seeing that. I have not either seen it either, and it'll be something to talk about. So tune in next time for New York, New York, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.